Hello everyone. I cannot believe it, but it's already mid-September and the T20 World Cup is just around the corner. Anticipation is building, as host Australia hope to be the first ever host to win the World Cup and the first ever team to win it back-to-back. This video is part 1 into a preview of this year's tournament, which in my opinion will be one of the most even we've had in recent memory. In part 1, attention is on the first round and looking at those teams that are trying to get into the Super 12 phase. But first, let's have a quick talk about likely weather conditions and the locations where this World Cup will be held. This video is quite a long one and we have a lot of things to cover. So if you'd like to skip ahead and have a look at different parts instead, I've put some timestamps down below. Either way, I hope you enjoy the video. This World Cup is being played across 7 different locations around Australia. Most of these stadiums you've probably heard of if you've watched cricket before. In Melbourne, we have the Melbourne Cricket Ground or MCG. In Sydney, we have the SCG or Sydney Cricket Ground. In Adelaide, we have the Adelaide Oval. In Perth, we have Optus Stadium, and in Brisbane, we have the Gabba. For the first round, games will also be played at Hobart, in Blundstone Arena, and in Geelong at GMHBA Stadium. Fun fact about GMHBA Stadium, it's only ever held one other international cricket game before. That was in 2017, and a T20 between Australia and Sri Lanka. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays in this tournament. While all of these grounds have their own unique playing profile, Australian pitches are historically faster and bouncier than you would see in other parts of the world, especially the subcontinent. Therefore, we are likely to see high-scoring games with pace bowling being favoured. But that's not to say spin won't play a part, because it will. But it's just that teams are likely to choose their squads based on these characteristics. As it is still spring, there are more chances of rain and related weather delays, especially in the first half of the tournament. Because summer is not yet here, the pitches may be a little slower and a little greener than what we would normally expect from a pitch in Australia. But that could also lead to lower scoring contests, especially in the first half of the tournament. But on the whole, weather permitting, conditions for cricket in Australia should be perfect for this tournament. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to the fun stuff, the first round of the World Cup. And in that first round, 8 different teams have qualified. In Group A, we have Namibia, Netherlands, Sri Lanka, and the UAE. In Group B, we have Ireland, Scotland, West Indies, and Zimbabwe. In each group, each team plays each other once, and the top 2 teams from each group qualify for the Super 12 phase. Beginning with Group A, the first team we will look at is Sri Lanka. Recent Asia Cup winners Sri Lanka are the obvious favourites to win this group. After losing their first game to Afghanistan in the Asia Cup, Sri Lanka did not lose another game all the way to the final. They beat Bangladesh, Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan twice to take the title. Led by Dasun Shanaka, they have a real momentum going into this tournament and a very well-rounded side. Their experiences versus Australia earlier this year and the Asia Cup victory will stand them in good stead for this tournament, and I really think they're going to go very deep, all the way perhaps to a semi-final spot. Amongst the players to watch in this side are the spin duo of Mahesh Theekshana and Wanendu Hasaranga. Both of them are in the top 10 T20 international bowling rankings at the moment. Also watch for the big hitting of Bhanuka Rajapaksa and Pathum Nissanka, as well as Dasun Shanaka himself. His role as a talismanic captain and a match winner in his own right is growing day by day. They are likely to have a massive supporter base in Australia, and they're also driven to put some smiles on people's faces back home. I really think they're going to go well, even if that means that it's going to start from the first round this time around. Now on to the Netherlands, and the Netherlands topped their group to make the World Cup, and the 11 that were in the final of that tournament are in this squad. The squad looks to mix in both youth and experience, as stalwarts Peter Seeler and Ryan ten Doeschate have both departed the team in the last 12 months. This year has seen the Netherlands play a number of series against full member nations in the lead up to this World Cup. These teams include New Zealand, England, West Indies and Pakistan. Key to their success is a good start with the bat at the top of the order, with players such as Max O'Dowd, Bas van der Lede and Steven Myburgh. Their bowling mix of swing and seam with a little bit of orthodox spin thrown in will really suit conditions in Geelong. For me, the Netherlands will probably be fighting Namibia for that second spot in this group. Unfortunately, apart from 1 or 2 upsets, I don't see them going past the Super 12 phase in this World Cup. Nevertheless, they will be striving for a positive performance to represent their country. Now on to one of the surprise packets of last year's World Cup in the UAE, Namibia. Namibia hope to back up their Super 12 appearance in last year's tournament with a similar performance here. Key to their fortunes this time around will be their bowling attack, headlined by Ruben Trumpelman. What a name, and what a talent. Also look out for Jan Freiling, JJ Smit, and the evergreen David Visa. If their performances match their abilities, Their bowling can keep teams to low scores and maximise any chances they might have of wins. That's not to discount their batting though, which is very capable in its own right. I see Namibia fighting fiercely with the Netherlands for that second spot. Rounding out this group is the UAE, and the UAE qualified through the qualifier tournament earlier this year. Of all the teams in this group, the UAE are probably the most interesting to me. The majority of their games are played in the UAE and Oman, and there we have low, slow pitches and hot, humid conditions. These types of playing conditions would usually promote a low-scoring game plan, and yet the UAE's success is tied very much to their run scoring and offense, with players such as Mohamed Wasim and Vricha Aravind. How will the better weather and batter-friendly pitches affect their performances? Could we see them pull off a few upsets? Or could they fail to acclimatise to these new bouncier, faster wickets? Their performances in the recent Asia Cup qualifiers were not the best, and unfortunately I don't see them getting past this group. Let's also hope that the dropping of their most capped player ever, Rohan Mustafa, does not affect their performances on the pitch either. Moving on to Group B now, and what a tough group this is. There's a few teams in this group that you would expect to already be in the Super 12 phase, but what can you do? Their spot in this group is because of their past performances. What that means for us is that we're going to see a hotly contested group here, for all of them looking to get into the Super 12 phase. The first and perhaps the biggest team in this group is the West Indies. Former two-time winners of the World Cup, the squad that the West Indies have chosen is very much the same as they've been using in the past year with series against New Zealand, Bangladesh and India. With the era of stalwarts like Dwayne Bravo, Kieron Pollard and Chris Gayle now over, Chief Selector and cricketing legend Desmond Haynes has said that he's going to look at giving opportunities to youth as well as those players that have performed well in this year's CPL tournament. Andre Russell has not been picked for this side, and that's a big out. But from the selector's point of view, you can see that they're trying to reward commitment to the national side, as well as what Desmond Haynes was saying earlier. There is a strong pace bowling focus in this side, with Alzari Joseph leading the line in his first ever T20 World Cup. But don't forget about spinners like Akil Hussain and Yannick Carrier, who will become extremely important, especially in the middle overs. The fast bouncy wickets will suit their big hitters, players like Rovman Powell, captain Nicholas Puron, and a revitalised, in-form Johnson Charles. Looking into their fortunes for this World Cup, and it's really hard to say where they will end up. On paper, this team has the ability to reach the latter stages of the World Cup at least. They have the weapons and the skill sets that would suit Australian conditions. However, the inconsistency of their performances and the previous tendency of earlier players to pick and choose when they wanted to play for the national side has meant that they've ended up in this position in the first place. They should get past this first round, and then where they end up will depend largely on their own form. They are still one of the most entertaining teams in world cricket, and whether that be on the winning or losing end is really up to them. The next team in this group is Zimbabwe. Heading into this tournament, Zimbabwe have performed really well against teams such as India, Bangladesh and Australia, although some of these games were in the one-day format. It shows a team that is slowly moving towards a new generation of players after their experienced core that has helped them for so long moves towards the twilight of their careers. Star bowler Blessing Muzarabani is coming off a long injury layoff, but will be supported by Richard Ngarava and Brad Evans along with a bevy of spin options. For them to progress into the Super 12 phase, it's going to be really important that their bowling and fielding support the batting lineup, which has been fragile at times. Nevertheless, Zimbabwe's batters need to put runs on the board. Not just experienced heads like Craig Irvine, Sean Williams and Sikandar Raza, but Wesley Matavire as well. This could be a breakout tournament for him and set up lucrative overseas T20 contracts into the future. It's not guaranteed that they're going to qualify for the Super 12s, especially in the hotly contested nature of this group, but I'm sure that they're going to be fighting for that second spot. What I really hope is for the younger players to use this opportunity in a new competition to take up the mantle that the older generation have started, towards moving Zimbabwean cricket as a whole back to the way it used to be in earlier eras. Team 3 in Group B is Ireland, and Ireland have just come off a series win against Afghanistan, as well as a long summer fixture list against India, New Zealand and South Africa. They also topped their group in the qualifier tournament earlier this year. For Ireland, weather conditions in Hobart should be very similar to those that they have at home, perhaps minus the rain. The core selection of this squad continues and doesn't change between formats all that much. That means that they have a strong team chemistry. A swashbuckling Paul Sterling, classy captain Andrew Balbirnie, and keeper batsman Lorcan Tucker are going to be relied upon heavily for their runs at the top of the order, especially as all-rounders George Dockrell and Harry Tector tend to protect a long-ish tail. It could be argued that historically, their development has been hindered because they just haven't had enough games against full member nations. And really, that's quite a valid argument. But this World Cup serves as an opportunity to do just that, to move up the ICC rankings. They're going to fight very hard for that second spot. And if they make it into the Super 12s, you can bet they're going to cause an upset or two on the way. The last team in this group is Scotland. And unfortunately, since the World Cup last year, Scotland have only played 2 T20 internationals. And that was a brief home series against New Zealand, where they were beaten comfortably. This lack of T20 internationals for Scotland has been a persistent problem, and it hasn't been helped by the COVID pandemic. What that means is, the warm-up games that they do have against the Netherlands and the UAE are going to be even more important. But unfortunately for me, in terms of making this video, it's been really hard to gauge where they're at the moment. We must not forget that they did make the Super 12 phase last time around, and they do have the pedigree to be able to do it again. But being in the most competitive of the two groups, they face an uphill battle to get into the Super 12s. But I wouldn't put it past them to do it. With Group A and B now reviewed, let's have a look at some of the matches that I think you should be watching during this first round. On the screen now are my picks for the games that you should be watching each day during this first round. The first round of the World Cup is always full of surprises. For many fans, myself included, this is one of the only opportunities that I get to see some of these teams and the players full stop on TV. Therefore, I encourage you to watch as many as you can, if you have the time. All of the games in the first round are being scheduled as double headers, running between the 16th and the 21st of October. The last thing I want to talk about are the predictions that I have on who will qualify through this first round. And overall, on paper, it's hard to argue against Sri Lanka and the West Indies topping out their respective groups. But the second spot is much harder to predict. In Group A, my gut says that the Netherlands are going to do it, but Namibia could also take the spot. In Group B, honestly, all three of them could qualify. But if you were to put my neck on the line, I would say probably Zimbabwe. And that's it for part 1 of this preview into the World Cup. I'd be really interested to know who you think is going to progress into the Super 12 phase from here, and which players do you think we should be watching out for. If you like this video and this preview, please leave a thumbs up below. And if you want to, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on part 2 of this preview that will be coming out just before the start of the World Cup. In part 2, I'll be looking at teams that are already in the Super 12 phase, as well as a prediction into who I think will be winning the World Cup. But in the meantime, take care, get excited for the World Cup, and I'll see you soon.